If a police officer asks you for consent, they are not doing that because they're confused about the law. They're doing it because consent is the shortcut. Consent is the key that unlocks your car, your pockets, your backpack, your phone, your home without a warrant. And the whole game is getting you to say sure before your brain catches up to what's happening. And I'm going to be very clear. I'm not telling you to be rude. I'm not telling you to fight. I'm not telling you to be a street lawyer. I'm telling you to understand the moment for what it is, a legal fork in the road. Because once you consent, you don't get to rewind the stop and say, actually, I didn't mean it. And even worse, most people don't even realize they consented. They think consent has to sound like, yes, officer, I give you permission to search. No. Consent can be a head nod, a step backward from the door, handing over keys, opening a trunk, moving a bag, saying, I guess, silence plus compliance. That's why officers ask in a friendly tone, with a casual smile, like it's no big deal. So this video is about the one thing they're hoping you forget. You have a constitutional right to say no. And if you don't say no clearly, you're setting yourself up for the consent cures all problem. Let's start with the foundation. The Fourth Amendment protects you against unreasonable searches and seizures. That generally means the government needs a warrant supported by probable cause, unless an exception applies. Consent is one of the biggest exceptions because if you voluntarily agree, the warrant requirement evaporates. And the Supreme Court has said the government doesn't have to prove you knew you could refuse. They just have to show that under the totality of the circumstances, your consent was voluntary. Read that again. They don't have to make sure you understand you can refuse. That's why an officer can ask you to just take a quick look, and you can accidentally waive your protection in the moment. That's the legal trap. Now let's talk about how this plays out in real life. You're driving. You get pulled over. License, insurance, registration. You hand it over. You're polite. And then here it comes. Mind if I take a look in the car? You don't have anything illegal, right? If you got nothing to hide, you won't mind. Just trying to get you on your way. And right there, your entire stop turns on one decision. Here's the truth. Officers ask for consent because they often don't have probable cause. If they already had a legal basis to search, they wouldn't need your permission. They might prefer your permission because it's clean, quick, and hard to challenge later, but they wouldn't need it. So what should you do? First, stay calm, stay polite, keep your hands visible, and don't make quick movements. You don't want to hand them an officer safety storyline. You don't want the report to say you were extremely nervous, agitated, making furtive movements, reaching, leaning. The calmer you are, the fewer facts they can claim. Second, say the words clearly. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. That's it. No debate, no explanation, no attitude, just a clean refusal. And here's why those exact words matter. Officers are trained to phrase the request like it's a formality, not a real question. If you hesitate, if you mumble, if you say, do you need to? They will treat that as permission. They may write in the report that you agreed, you cooperated, you allowed the search, and now your lawyer is fighting uphill. Third, immediately ask the next question that locks the stop into a legal box. Officer, am I free to go or am I being detained? That question matters because it draws a bright line between a traffic stop and what officers love to convert it into, a consensual encounter. Because here's another truth most people don't know. The Supreme Court has said officers do not have to tell you you're free to go before asking for consent. So they can keep chatting, keep smiling, keep asking just one more thing, and many people feel like they can't leave. And if you just stay there, talking, answering, explaining, an officer will later argue you were voluntarily continuing the encounter. That's the legal story they want. So you do this instead. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. Am I free to go or am I being detained? If you're free to go, leave. Slowly, safely, legally. If you're being detained, now we move into the next layer. You stop talking. You're polite, but you stop giving them information. Officer, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. And if they keep pushing and you're not free to go, I want a lawyer. I'm not answering questions without a lawyer. Now let's address a huge misconception. If I refuse, won't I look guilty? No. Refusing consent is not the same as confessing to a crime. Refusing consent is you exercising a constitutional right. But here's the nuance. There are some limited contexts, like certain DUI implied consent chemical testing rules, where refusing a breath test or blood test can carry legal consequences depending on state law and the facts. The Supreme Court has addressed parts of this area, and it's not identical to a normal search my car request. That's why I want you to focus on what we're talking about today. The classic consent search of your vehicle, your bags, your person, your home. In that world, the clean rule is don't consent. Make them do it the hard way, through legal process. Now, suppose you did consent, or you think you accidentally did. Is it over? Not always. Because consent has two major concepts people ignore: scope and withdrawal. Scope means this: even if you consent, the search is supposed to stay within what a reasonable person would have understood you agreed to. But courts often interpret general consent very broadly, especially in vehicles. For example, the Supreme Court has said that when a person consents to a search of a car for drugs, it's generally reasonable for an officer to open containers inside the car that could hold drugs. So when you casually say, yeah, go ahead, you might have just authorized the officer to open bags, boxes, compartments, and more. That's why limiting scope matters. If you ever feel pressured and you're going to say anything at all, you limit it. I do not consent to a search, but if you're ordering me, I'm not resisting. And if you have already consented and you want to stop it, you can try to withdraw it clearly. Officer, I am withdrawing my consent. I do not consent to any further search. Withdrawal can be recognized, but it needs to be clear, and the facts matter. Now let's talk about the nice guy trick that shows up in almost every stop. Officer, do you mind if I take a quick look? You, I'd rather not. Officer, so you don't want to cooperate? You, I'm not saying that. Officer, then you don't mind if I check? That's how people get walked into consent. The solution is one sentence, repeatable under stress. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. And then stop filling the silence. Silence feels awkward. People want to explain. They want to justify. They want to prove they're a good person. That instinct is normal, but legally, it's a trap. Now, I want to shift to the home because the home is where people make the biggest mistakes. When officers come to your door, it's often a knock and talk. They knock, they stand there, they want you to open the door and start talking, and once you do, you've given them two gifts. Gift number one, consent opportunities. Mind if we step in? Mind if we look around? Mind if we just check something real quick? Gift number two, plain view. They're scanning behind you. They're looking past your shoulders. They're looking for anything to justify the next step. So what should you do? You are not required to open the door for a knock and talk. If they don't have a warrant, you can ignore them. If you choose to communicate, you can do it with the door closed. Officer, do you have a warrant? If the answer is no, then I do not consent to any search. I'm not opening the door without a warrant. If they say yes, you ask to see it. A real warrant is a document. It's not we can get one. It's not my supervisor approved it. It's not we're working on it. It's an actual warrant. And here's a critical Supreme Court rule. Consent is not voluntary if it's given only because the officer claims they already have a warrant. In other words, consent obtained through we have a warrant pressure is not real consent. So if someone says, open up, we have a warrant, you don't argue. You don't fight. You calmly say, please slide the warrant under the door or show it to me. And if it's legitimate, you comply without consenting to anything beyond what the warrant authorizes. Now, there's another situation at home people don't think about: multiple occupants. Let's say you live with a spouse, roommate, family member. Officers come to the door. One person is nervous and wants it to be over. The other person is saying, no, no, no. If you are physically present and you clearly refuse consent, that refusal matters. The Supreme Court has held that when two co-occupants are present and one refuses, police generally can't rely on the other occupant's consent to override that refusal for a warrantless home search. That's why your words have to be clear. If you're the one refusing, you say it out loud. I do not consent to any search. Now back to the street, because consent is not just about cars and houses. It's also about those casual encounters where an officer approaches you in public. Hey, can I talk to you for a second? Where are you headed? You got anything on you I should know about? Mind if I pat you down? These interactions often start as what courts call a consensual encounter, meaning you may be free to end it. But the whole point is to see whether you'll cooperate, answer questions, and ultimately consent. So the first question is always, officer, am I being detained or am I free to go? If you're free to go, you can leave. If you're being detained, then you stop giving them information and you don't consent. Now let's deal with the moment officers push the hardest, when they want you to help them help you. They'll say things like, I'm just trying to clear you. This will be faster if you cooperate. If you don't consent, I'll just call a dog. If you don't consent, I'll get a warrant. Listen carefully. I can get a warrant is not a warrant, it's pressure. And there's a separate legal issue here, prolonging stops. The Supreme Court has held that officers generally cannot extend a traffic stop beyond the time needed to handle the reason for the stop, like writing a ticket just to conduct a dog sniff, unless they have independent, reasonable suspicion. So if you're sitting there and the ticket is done, and now it turns into just hang tight while we wait, you keep asking us, officer, am I free to go or am I being detained? And you keep your refusal clean. I do not consent to any searches. Now, I'm going to tell you something uncomfortable. Even when you do everything right, officers sometimes search anyway. They'll say they smelled something, they saw something, they feared for safety, they believed you were hiding something. They might be wrong, they might even be lying, but you do not fix that on the roadside. You fix it later in court. And that's why, if they're going to search anyway, you do this. Officer, I do not consent to this search, but I am not resisting. That sentence protects you in two directions. You're making your constitutional position clear, and you're making your physical compliance clear, so you don't get hit with resisting language. Now let's talk about the sneakiest form of consent. Consent by action. Officer, can you step out? You step out. Officer, do you mind if I check the trunk? You pop the trunk. Officer, where's the bag? You point to it. Officer, can you open it? You open it. That's consent. That's you doing the searching for them. And it's devastating in court because it looks cooperative and voluntary. Your job is to stop doing their work. If they ask you to open something, your answer is, I do not consent to any searches. If they order you, meaning it's not a request, it's different. You comply with lawful orders like stepping out of a vehicle in a traffic stop, but you don't help them search. Now, let me give you the exact consent script you should memorize. Because in real life, you won't have time to craft sentences. Your heart will pound, your mouth will go dry. That's why officers love consent requests. Stress makes people compliant. Here's the script. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. Am I free to go or am I being detained? I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I want a lawyer. That's the spine. Everything else is extra. And now let's go one layer deeper, the psychology. Officers often ask for consent after they create a sense of inevitability. They'll say, just so you know, if you don't consent, we'll be here a while. Your refusal is making this suspicious. I'm going to search anyway, so you might as well let me. That last line is designed to make you feel like you have no control. But you do have control over one thing, whether you hand them a legal shortcut. Even if they search anyway, don't give consent. Because consent removes arguments your lawyer could make later about the legality of the stop, the detention, the scope, the basis, the reasonableness. Consent can sanitize a lot of problems. Now, I want to address one more trap. We're just going to do a quick pat-down for weapons. A pat-down, what many people call a frisk, is not supposed to be a full search for evidence. It's supposed to be limited in scope and based on safety concerns. But in the real world, people casually agree to it, and then it turns into pockets, bags, containers, everything. So if an officer asks for a pat-down as a request, you respond like this. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. If they do it anyway, you don't fight. You repeat, I do not consent, but I'm not resisting. Now, I also want to talk about one of the most important facts about consent. Consent has to be voluntary. Courts look at the totality of circumstances, things like how many officers were present, whether weapons were displayed, the tone of voice, whether you were told you could refuse, whether you were physically blocked, whether you were threatened, whether your ID was held, whether you were surrounded. But here's the problem. Voluntary is often interpreted in a way that is extremely favorable to the government, which is why your best protection is to avoid consent entirely. Now let's do some rapid-fire examples so you can hear how this sounds in the moment. Example 1, the friendly search. Officer, hey, mind if I take a look in the car real quick? You. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. Officer, why not? You got something to hide? You. I do not consent to any searches. Am I free to go or am I being detained? Example 2, the it'll be faster trick. Officer, if you just let me look, you'll be on your way. You, I understand. I do not consent to any searches. Am I free to go or am I being detained? Example 3, the we can do this the easy way pressure. Officer, I can do this the easy way or the hard way. You, I do not consent to any searches. I'm not resisting. Am I free to go or am I being detained? Example 4, the home knock. Officer, open the door. We just need to talk. You, through the door. Officer, do you have a warrant? Officer, no, but if you don't open up, we'll get one. You, I do not consent to any search. I'm not opening the door without a warrant. Example 5. The bus, the street, the random contact. Officer, mind if I check your bag? You, I do not consent to any searches. Am I being detained or am I free to go? And here's why these phrases are so powerful. They are short, calm, and legally meaningful. You're not debating. You're not escalating. You're not giving a speech. You're giving a clean position that your lawyer can later work with. Now, one last thing, because this is where people panic. What if you refuse and the officer gets mad? That happens. Some officers take it personally. Some officers will try to punish you with time, intimidation, or sarcasm. They may say, okay, then we're going to do this the hard way. Your response stays the same. You don't argue. You don't apologize. You don't backpedal. You keep your calm. You keep your hands visible, and you keep your words consistent, because the moment you start debating, you start volunteering information. The moment you get emotional, the moment you raise your voice, the moment you move quickly, the moment you start explaining, you've given them new material to work with. Your job is simple. Don't consent, don't chat, don't create new facts. And if the stop crosses the line, if you're not free to go, if they keep interrogating you, if they keep pushing, you lock it down. I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I want a lawyer. That's it. So remember the title of this video. If police ask for consent, they're hoping you forget this. Your rights don't disappear because an officer is standing there smiling and asking nicely. Consent is the shortcut. Don't hand it to them. Memorize the phrase. Practice saying it out loud in a calm voice. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. And then follow it with the question that forces clarity. Am I free to go or am I being detained? Stay calm. Don't make quick movements. Don't argue on the roadside. Don't open doors to your own rights. And if it turns into a detention, stop talking and ask for a lawyer. Because consent is what they want, and the moment you forget that, the Fourth Amendment becomes optional by your own hand.